am so excited to be here and to interview and have everyone meet and discover a little bit about Ishle Yi Park. I know her because I met her kind of online here in Hawaii as Lonnie Park, so I'll be probably referring to her as both names. Lonnie, as she'll explain later, is a little more how she's known through the music world, and Ishle Yi Park is through the literary world, and we're going to be talking about both things. So she is a Korean American poet, writer, musician, teacher, hula dancer, Lomi Lomi practitioner, certified yoga instructor, surfer, and mother. And she is the first woman poet laureate of Queens, New York. She was described by the New York Times as having the voice of an angel and the soul of a rock star. And her first book of poetry, The Temperature of This Water, won the 3 literary awards, including the PEN America Open Book Award for Outstanding Writers of Color. Her newest book, Angel and Hannah, which is on One World Random House, is a moving and lyrical retelling of the Romeo and Juliet story set in 1990s New York between a young Asian, specifically Korean girl, and Latino, a Puerto Rican boy. And she was nominated also for 2 Na Hoku Nominee awards for Best Album of the Year, which is Grassroots, and Best Song of the Year, Aloha Aina. And she lives with her 2 keiki, her 2 daughters, her children, on the Big Island, and is immersed in rural life there. So, so glad that you're here, Lonnie.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Annie. Komawayo. you know her as Stephanie Han, but she's been such a wonderful big sister for me in this literary world, and I'm so lucky and grateful to, be friends with her. And I'm so happy to be here with all you Korean people.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of a really opportunity here. So I'm going to focus a little bit on your wonderful book, but also your perspective on life, your history of how you became a writer and performer. And you had wanted to title this talk, interview, The Transforming in the Translating of Han Through Art. And so I thought what we do is there's going to be some Korean Americans, there's a range of us. For those who may be out there, if you can explain the term Han for some, because there'll be some who don't understand this. And tell me a little bit about, what is this transforming and translating it? And so go ahead.
Okay. So, from my understanding or my heart feeling, Han is kind of like this unspoken pain, grief, like weight that people carry in their soul, in their gut, and they don't let it go. It's like some hurt, and it could be ancestral trauma, it could be historical, it could be a mix of all that, and it just kind of sits in you, and you don't really express it. So in Korean culture, people like you talk about Han because we carry Han personally and collectively because of everything that we've been through. So I feel like in my lifetime, one of the things that I'm doing is letting go of some of those stones of Han and expressing through poetry and music some of the things, the kind of challenging moments, the traumas that I've been through, and historically my family and people, my culture, people have been through. And I think in speaking about our truths instead of like just holding it in and keeping it a secret, there is something very healing about that. And so I pray that it can be healing on a collective level too. And it's definitely been healing for my own journey as a human being because I feel healthier and happier and lighter since doing that. And it's a process. It's not like I'm ever done.
Great.
We're all works in progress, and it's part of my journey. And I hope that it can also help you as well. So that's kind of what I was thinking about and talking about with transforming and
Right.
yeah.
Right. So first of all, this book, this is such a beautiful book. It's lyrical, it's a beautiful work of art. And I was really impressed with the honesty and the refreshing reminder of the energy of love in youth. And I would like to know what prompted an entire novel in verse, because people write novels and then they write poetry books. But an entire novel in verse is really a rare accomplishment, and it's a testament to your skill. And I want to know, like, what, like, this is a whole book in verse. And yeah, what prompted this choice, this to do it, a whole book like this?
Well, first, thank you so much for your kind words. Haranghe, kumawayo. In terms of what prompted it, to be honest, it's based on my own first love. So that's kind of where the seed of the idea came from. And unlike the book, my first love was very long. It was over 10 years. And at the end of that, I kind of wanted to have a closure of and some kind of gift to remember that love, and to bring it forward into the future. But I didn't want to write a nonfiction book because I didn't want people all prying into my life. I had that with my first book. And so I was like, enough, let's make it a fiction. And so I did that. And then I kind of had the vision of a love story that it came in a dream and it was in an arc. And I saw these beautiful poems that kind of highlighted these very intense moments in their life. And it was through a season, like, one season from, spring, summer, fall, winter. And I was like, oh, okay, I want to do this. And so it was just for myself and as a gift to my beloved. And also, that's how it started. But then it turned into this all encompassing project that would keep me up at nights. And it became bigger and expanded. I thought it was originally just going to be a chapbook, but then other characters started wanting to come in and talk and, express themselves. And so I let that happen. And then it blossomed into a book.
This is amazing.
So that
And
was
I
kind of the
think it's
journey.
also, yeah, I think it's also very interesting that you use the frame of Romeo and Juliet. This is a very, this is a
Mhm.
classic literary frame. And you talk even, you break that wall and you talk to the reader about, I'm going to do this in sonnet and this not. And I'm just interested in your sort of play on the form. So why, how Romeo and Juliet, what is it you were trying to say about communities and individuals here?
Well, I wanted to make the comparison to Romeo and Juliet because I feel like, all love is sacred and beautiful and intense. And when you're going through it, it feels epic. And sometimes we have a tendency in our culture to kind of glorify European, writing and literature and love, even, and then, marginalize other kind of, narratives. And so for me, it was important to, show that these young people in Queens and Brooklyn, their love is just as sacred and as profound. And, comparing it to, or, putting these other classical historical texts and referencing them just is, for me, a way of showing that we're all connected through this, and you cannot glorify somebody's life and demean somebody else's. And it's kind of hopefully a look from the inside out. And yeah, I definitely read a lot of, Shakespeare and Elizabeth Barrett Browning and this and that, but I also read Elizabeth Alexander and, Rita Dove, and then, studied a lot of hip hop actually for this book because it's written in Petrarchan sonnets, Elizabethan, Spencerian sonnets, free verse, and hip hop bars, which are 16 lines, So if you want, you could go and see which one is which and kind of do the homework and have fun like that if you're really into poetry and, lines and stuff like that. But it was fun for me. It was a fun project. And there were times when it was excruciating, but I just felt like it was a story that needed to be told and, centers another narrative that is our narrative, my narrative, and the narrative of young Asian Americans who don't really get a chance to speak out as much or are not centered in our media. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And I'd like to hear a little about who your intended audience was. And you had mentioned something about, I love this. You said something, your job is not to be a cultural tour guide. And I really respected that you didn't talk down to the audience. Like, me as a Korean American, I could get the references, and you didn't do any of this, like, this is what kimchi is, that kind of explaining. So I was wondering if you talk a little bit about this, like your sort of stance in doing that.
Yeah, I when I write for myself and then a company of writers or people in my head who are friends and family members and other writers who I respect and love. So there's like, maybe a group of 5 or 6 people who I'm thinking kind of like, what would they think about this? Would they get it? Would they, And so they're in my mind and I'm in my mind, and then the greater audience is in my mind. But at the same time, like when it gets down to it, it's just a story and it's just about these characters. So you have to get really intimate, and I wanted it to be intimate. I didn't want it to feel like a sociological text. It's like a love story first, and so I wanted to kind of make sure that that was seen and heard and
Mhm,
understood.
mhm. And I was really curious about your exploration of women too, and men and roles, but there's some pretty intense poems here, Girl Fight, Girls Night Out. They discuss this violence that exists in this world. And, it's always lurking. It's just underneath, rumbling throughout the piece. And Hannah, that character, she's not really safe there, but yet there's a kind of persistence of her to stay within this dangerous space. And what is this? And yeah, I'm just curious about this.
Yeah, I totally understand. The space around her was dangerous, but she had that core of love there and warmth. And I think that's something that she didn't have within her own like family dynamic. It's a different culture and a different way of showing love. And so this new or the Angels family, the way they showed love was so warm and inviting and very like and the way he showed her love was something she never experienced. So I think that that kept her there through everything else.
Hmm. Hmm. And how do you think what we're going to do actually right now is I was wondering if you could read a poem from it.
Sure.
You pick one and give us a little bit about the background, and yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So this poem is called Arirang, and I'll start by singing a little bit of Arirang, and it's just about the first time they meet, but it's a little bit of backstory too. So hope you enjoy. Arirang, arirang, arario. Arirang gogeru no ganda. 나를 버리고 가신 님 시도 못 가서 발령난다. In the old Korean song, one lover leaves another on Arirang Mountain. You won't walk 10 li away from me without an ache in your feet, she sings, because that is the nature of love. Memories live on, make a home inside a body. It's wisdom from Hana's home country, from women who love in moon villages far from the sea. When Hana's mother left Korea with Hana in her belly, she stole that song across the ocean, sang it as a lullaby as she bathed Hana's young skin. Years later, Hana hums Arirang on her way to meet her first lover, from the moon village of Queens to the moon village of Brooklyn. April, Aigu, Paraminata. A fresh wind blows inside her. Last night, the wind shook mimosas on Fifth, so she walks on white petals to meet him.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. That was great. I'd like to hear if you can talk to us a little bit about the process. How do you feel? I read The Temperature of Water, This Water, which is your first book. I can see sort of thematic elements reoccurring, obviously in Angel and Hannah. And I'd like to know, how do you think your writing has evolved and changed over the years? This book, your most recent book, was 10 years from, it took you 10 years to write. So you must have changed also during the course of that time, your writing.
Yes, definitely. My first book, I was a baby when it came out. I was around 24. And so it was my first experiment into being a writer. So I had a little bit of everything, and it was just like me starting out. And then I think with Angel and Hannah, I really kind of developed this storyline and a voice. And so for me, that book was a big progression because it was a major project and I thought of it and I planned it in a different way than, the first book. So it was definitely much more thought out and outlined and kind of, conceived as an idea first before I wrote it. And the first book was more like, how do I put together a book? So
Hmm.
this one, I felt like I understood how the car works a little better. I could drive it a little more smoothly and have fun on the road if you compare
Right,
to driving. Yeah. So
right.
for Angel and Hannah, it definitely felt like that. And then what's interesting is, you know, I have written other books and they'll be coming out and they're all very different and they mark different chapters of my life. So the next one that hopefully will come out is totally different in tone than Angel and Hannah. And so it's interesting for me to see how I evolve as a writer and how the styles change throughout space and time and what I'm into. So for Angel and Hannah, I was really studying form and really into, all of this, like strict kind of like linear thinking. And the second book is very circular, very round, very womanly. And it's because it was while I was pregnant with my child. And so it's a different kind of feeling in the writing, much simpler. It's not like so, in the head, it's more in the heart centered. And so I like seeing how my writing and my music changes as I ripen in life.
Right, right. That's totally interesting. I was wondering if if you can talk a little bit. We have some people here who might be thinking of going into the arts,
Hmm.
young Korean Americans. And what was your life like growing up? Were you a family of artists? I mean, how did your family react? Person here is, Mom, I'm going to be a poet. This is not something to bring joy to an immigrant family's heart, to be blunt. And so I was just wondering, what was your family like? How did it affect your creative path?
You know, Yeah, to be very honest, like my parents are very creative. I think they're very creative. They just never really had a chance or an outlet to express it they couldn't become like the artists. It had to happen in the next generation because they were still busy like surviving and making sure that we had what we needed to have. But within our house, like my dad was always singing like from when I was a child and I learned my love of music from him and from my mother. She was like majored in English and she was always reading these huge, thick, heavy novels of like, the greats. And so that kind of stuff was always around my house when I was younger. And I was really lucky to have such like literary mom. I mean, we would talk about books all the time and discuss what we liked and didn't like. And she was the one who actually brought me over to the Asian American Writers Workshop when I was 14 years old for the first time. And I have to say, I think she's here. So, 안녕하세요, 엄마. Happy 77th birthday. But she really sparked my love of writing. And when I went to that was a huge life changing moment for me. I still remember it to this day. I was 14 years old. I loved writing, but I never saw anybody who looked like me who was a writer. And she took me to this event in the city, which was a big deal because we're in Queens. She never went to the city. Like she never drove into that craziness, but she went that time and she brought me. And so I got a chance to see all these Asian American writers who look like me sharing their personal stories, and it moved me so much. Like I was sitting in the theater crying, like it's possible. Maybe I can do that one day. So she sparked that kind of light in me. So if you don't like my choice, I'm like, your fault because you got me into it. I know, just kidding, but I love you. But I'm grateful that
And
I had that support in that way.
right,
Yeah.
right. And what I also like is I sense there's something, I see this on your posts and stuff, this idea of you're very aware of Korean American society,
Mhm.
class differentials. You talk about you're a single mama. What does that mean? And I was wondering if you could speak to this kind of, this is a story too of Korean America. And speak a little bit about motherhood and, that whole bit.
Yeah, motherhood is the most humbling, beautiful, like fun, and also challenging experience I've ever had. I love every minute of it. My children, they give me reason and purpose to go forward. And I feel like part of what I'm doing, I want them to see that it's possible, you know? So in order for them me to show them that, I have to really do it. And so I feel like in a way I got a second wind, I got a second opportunity because I was doing this whole poetry and music thing when I was younger in my 20s, and I had a great time. I traveled the world and everything, but then I wanted to nest and have a family. There was a point when it felt kind of empty, and I felt like I wanted to move on and revolve and live like a full different life, like a natural life. So that's what I did. And so then those years were totally dedicated to the children. And as a single mother, I really didn't have much time to write. I was like literally
Mhm.
like, trying to put food on the table every day, like working sometimes 3 to 5, 7 jobs. I'm Korean, so I have many jobs, and I would, you know, I lived very off grid at one point. I was at in a jungle, like battling wild pigs at night. It was crazy. So time, there was literally very little time to sit and write. But then this book came back to me, and then I started working on it again, and it's just been a blessing. It's like a dream come true, honestly. So I'm so grateful. You know.
Great. Great. And I wanted to then kind of move to this idea. We see, you talk that this was potentially a little bit autobiographical. We see Hannah saying to Angel, I want out of here. They're in the urban area. They're in New York. And there's this vague reference. I don't want to give it all away, but to a faraway island. And here you are, a Korean American woman from Queens. You're not in New York anymore, and you're living on the Big Island. You're living like way more rural than I am in Honolulu. I'm totally urban. And so I want to know about your journey. This is quite interesting. You're like a rural person now, and in Hawaii.
Yeah, I have a song called Island Living, and I really enjoy it, because sometimes when you have one extreme, you want the other. And so I grew up in New York. I was in the city all the time when I was young, and I lived that fast life very young. And so part of me just needed to slow down and wanted to slow down and live a more natural, humble life. There were times when I was young in New York, it was nothing to go out and like spend $100 on like dinner and just hanging out with friends, and it was just like all about money, and it just was not fulfilling in certain ways, and like status and what kind of job you had. And so I really wanted to escape all that and go rootsy country and organic and see what that farming life is. And I found out I really love it. Like there's a part of me that really loves it, and I never just had an opportunity, or maybe I wasn't into it in the city. But growing things, like growing my own food, has been beautiful and very empowering. So I feel like I'm learning skills to survive. And it's great because, especially with what's going on in the world right now, I feel like these skills are coming in handy. I know that if the whole system breaks down, I know how to live off grid.
Right.
So it's interesting. And yeah, I'm grateful for the journey. And I love living out in the country and waking up to the sound of crickets and cookies instead of like, sirens.
Mhm.
So,
And how I'm curious also about, this kind of ties into you are a Na Hoku Nominee this year. This is a very big deal for people who don't know Hawaiian music. It's a sign of acceptance, and it's a sign of being part of this larger community in Hawaii, but also the musical creative community. Were you surprised? And it says something about your participation here. And I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about it. This, musical genre, you're not doing hip hop, you're doing Hawaiian music, right?
yeah, well, I'm doing island music and I love Hawaiian music, and I've been dancing hula to Hawaiian music since I landed over 12 years ago. So when I first landed, I knew, I mean, I traveled all over the world and I was looking for a place to nest. But when I came here, I knew that this is the place where my children will be born, where I will raise my family, and where my ashes will be scattered. So I just burst into tears. I knew it with my bones. And so I also want to pay tribute to Hawaiian people and culture while I live here. So from the beginning, I, started to study Lomi Lomi and take hula lessons and learn La'au Lapa'au, which is, the healing medicine with the plants. And so I wanted to kind of pay tribute in that way. And I love the music. From the minute I stepped off the plane, I was entranced. You know, I got an old record player so I could listen to all the old classics. And there was a beautiful time in my life when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I had this old record player. And oh my goodness, I just felt like I was in another era. Listening to this enchanting like country music, and it just transported me to such a beautiful place. So I really fell in love with it, and I just started to play it because I wanted to learn these songs that were so touching to my heart. And I guess now my music sounds like that. I've been here long enough. I feel like I've, you know, pretty local now. So I'm very grateful that it means a lot to me, especially as a Korean American, as an Asian American, to be recognized by the Na Hoku Hano Awards. Like, that was a dream for me at some point. I was like, wow, I remember dreaming about it. And then for this to happen now, it's like, mahalo ke akua.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to hear a little bit about the difference between composing, writing poetry, and then composing music. And, you even go under two different names. These are, there's a definite split here, but yet there's something, that's moving back and forth. And I'd like to hear about the difference between the process of writing these two different forms and, where that comes from, etc.
Yeah, you know, it's two different worlds. I have to say, when I'm writing poetry, I have to put my thinking cap on. I have to eat all my like, salmon and whatever, and I have to have my dictionary beside me, and I need to like be focused. It's like homework, you know, but it's soul work. But for music, it's totally like, it's a different journey. It's like really good on plant medicine, and that's, it takes you to another place, and you're communing with spirits sometimes, and it just comes from the heart, and there's like no think it's not as much thinking involved. It's just more like soul and spirit. So I feel like I need both, because with the writing I dive deep and I try to understand all these problems and traumas and conflicts, and it's more of like a kind of mental, it's a way of healing mentally, and then the music is a way of healing sonically and through the body. And it's, yeah, but I feel like they're both necessary. Sometimes after too much writing, I'm like, oh, I just need to listen to music for 3 days or a week, and I'll just get into a music flow. And then when the music flow is over and I want to dive deep, then, music is like floating on top and writing is diving into it. It feels like for
Mm-hmm.
me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, can we have a song? Can you
Oh,
do a
sure.
song for us?
Yeah. 안녕하세요. Aloha. So what do you want to hear, my dear?
Oh, you can do the Aloha Aina. That's the song nominee, maybe. Is that
Okay.
one you want to do? I
Yeah.
mean, it's up to you. Yeah. You got nominated for this song in particular, so I thought maybe it'd be fun for everybody to hear.
Okay. So Aloha Aina, I wrote this song during the lava flow, the last lava flow that Pele had, and it was while my family was being evacuated, like 75% of my little town at that point. And so it was quite an intense time, but I loved how everybody came together and really helped each other out, and how we loved each other. And then also, it's also about how people love the land here in Hawaii. And there is an Aloha Aina movement here in Hawaii. So if you look that up, you'll find out what that's all about. And so it's in tribute to all the people who love the land here. Let me just fix my. Okay. Through fire and water, through wind and rain, lava and flood, here for you, my friend. Through fire and water, through wind and rain, lava and flood, I love you, my dear friend. Mama Gaia is calling for cleansing. Tutu Pele creating us, purifying our Aina for new world rebirth. Oh, I said, wake up, my people. Wake up, my friend. It's time to bring me up Aloha Aina, mahalo keku. Aloha Aloha Aina, mahalo keku. Aloha It's time to replant, rebuild, regrow. It's time to trust in our hearts. We know we are the ones way too long, and we're blessed by God for sure. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and we're blessed by God for sure.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Ay, 고마워요. 너무 반가워요.
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're just gonna wrap up so people can ask some questions. I wanted to say you're gonna be teaching a class this summer for girls, exploring Romeo and Juliet, and you're an experienced teacher. And I'd like to know a little bit about your approach to teaching. What do you value in students? Kind of what is it that you want to pass on and hope that young women or young people would learn or get from poetry or writing?
Yeah, I would love to have a journey with young women and help them to see that they are the authors of their own life, and we can write our stories, and the world needs our stories. And we need to share those stories so that we're not forgotten or somebody else doesn't write our stories for us. So it's really important. And I think that, the more of us that do it, the better, And if you don't like my story, go out and write your own because it's important. We need to have that kind of representation and we have the power to do so, And so with this writing workshop, I would really love to explore with young women their voice and help them to kind of see that their lives are sacred and worth writing about and kind of show them tips and tricks on how to fictionalize things and kind of take it a step apart so that they can go deeper and make it into a larger truth. And so, yeah, it would be just a pleasure and an honor. I feel like everybody has these gifts inside them, and it's just a matter of developing them and helping them unfurl, going to the right people who will encourage you instead of trying to like dim your light, like help you shine. So.
Right. That's awesome. That's great. I love hearing that, you're a woman with this wisdom and you want to pass it on to other young women too. That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'd
And
like to open it up. If there's some questions, let's see. Are there any questions that you might have about music, about growing plants, about poetry? Let's see. Oh yeah, Katharina has a question.
Hoping I could. Hi, thank you so much. This was just amazing, and I loved how you sang for us, especially your arirang. It was just so moving. It kind of brought me back to where my mom used to sing that. Just wonderful. And it's just great. I'm a lawyer, like I said, and I think that I've been around corporate world, right? People who are, for lack of a better word, not as creative as you are. We don't really have, and I don't think I have a creative bone in my body, but it's just so nice to see that your spirit, has not been kind of contained. Because I think a lot of the times the Korean Americans, when we came here, we had to kind of work, right, in order to put food on our table and going to college and doing, the lawyer, doctor, whatever, engineering. That was kind of the path. And I do worry that sometimes I think people do things, out of exigence rather than sort of what they love. And it's just great to see you as a great role model for someone. And I know it was difficult for you. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about. What kind of challenges do you think you faced as a creative person who's a woman of color and Korean American specifically? What were some of the few challenges that you faced, and how did you deal with those?
Oh, thank you, Katarina. I'm grateful for your kindness and for your wisdom and for, sharing space. And it was very challenging. It's not easy to take this path. And I guess some of the challenges that I had to face, I'm always like the token Asian. If there's like some kind of, creative event, if there's like a multicultural group, they'll just call me, which is good and bad. I'm grateful for the money, any money that can help me make rent and help my children survive. And it's been a roller coaster, to be honest, in terms of, just being able to make a living and stuff. When I was younger and in my 20s, I was rolling and I was making good money doing it. And it was kind of like I lived like this enchanted life. And then when I came to reality, when I came to the big island and when I came to Hawaii and I wanted to live the humble life, I really had to live the humble life, including like a huge pay cut and going
Mhm.
from like making thousands for a show to like making $10 an hour doing some kind of minimum wage job like by the beach. So there were definitely ups and downs, and in choosing the artistic path, there were times when I like was like literally in starving artist mode, and that was not fun for my parents. Mianhe. and so, but thankfully with the book and everything, things are looking up. And so it's definitely been a journey with its ups and downs. And there were times when I had to sacrifice the art just to like make a living like everybody else, just take whatever kind jobs. And that's okay. And I feel like we don't have to be ashamed of that because that's part of it. That's part of the reality. And every artist that I know, pretty much, unless they're like really, really famous, they're doing that. And that's okay. And as long as we don't let people kill that spark of joy in us. Like we have to keep it alive. However you do it, like through hobby or through, your profession, I don't feel like it really matters as long as you keep it in your life. So, you keep that part of your soul alive.
Oh, thank you, Ishla. I would love to have you come back and sort of maybe you and Stephanie can do a little workshop so that we can kind of let some of these creative things, come out. That'd be great. And tell our stories. That'd be wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be a pleasure and honor. Come on, way.
Yeah. There's some questions, I think in the link, just so people know, Kevin, yeah, put the bunch of links where you can follow Lonnie. It's in the chat on Instagram and Facebook, and she's teaching at drstephaniehun.com. And if you're in the Big Island, she's doing readings, etc. And also, she does them for different organizations. We're all on Zoom now, so this is also something that people should be aware of. Are there any other questions that we might have for her? It's okay. She's just typing in for a free song.
Oh,
Yeah, and I think the other reason why I go by two different names, I'm like a Gemini, so I very much like have two personalities. And Ishle Yi Park is a more intellectual writing one, and then with the Lani I can be more free and in the music. And so yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your yeah, okay, here's the question. Do you have any advice for getting over the fear of putting yourself out there creatively?
That's a good question. So yeah, you just have to realize that this is your one life. So enjoy it, have fun, put it out there because you only live, well, who knows how many times we live, but I feel like it's important for us to express ourselves and kind of, not just live in fear. They want us to live in fear, but it's a very strong choice to not live in fear. And so you're going to make your mistakes along the way and you're going to regret certain pieces of art that you created, but you have a long life and you have a long time to kind of prove yourself as an artist and also just to go on that journey. So, it's okay. It's okay to have like those ups and downs and those dips. I mean, that's happened to me as well. You know, there are things that I've put out there that later I kind of regretted and stuff when I was older and more mature. But now I look back on it and I'm glad that I did. I think, oh, wow, I was young and I was kind of like, you know, free and hot headed. And it's okay I did that, you know? I'm still alive. My children are still here. They still love me. And, you know, so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I just want to say to everybody who's writing, thank you so much for your comments. My old emo brain, my anti brain, I don't know how to like respond to find you all to write you back individually, but later I will. I'll look at this.
And how, you know, what is your question is, what is your creative energy focused on now? What are some projects in development? Are you, I'm just curious too, are you working on something that's, you know, sort of Hawaii-ish or, you know, a little more local kind
Yeah.
stuff?
So I just finished a musical fundraiser and we raised $4,000 to help me rebuild my home studio that was lost during the whole lava flow. So I'm so grateful and I'm going to use that money to invest in more music gear and training. And so right now, every Friday, I'm kind of jamming with a group of roots reggae musicians over here in South Kona. So I think we'll do a reggae album together next. And I'm excited about that because you know, this is the first time I have jammed with like a group of like 7 or 8 people, and it's really fun and amazing. Usually, like I'm by myself with the mountains and the ocean, you know. So it's really nice to actually be in a group of people and be playing together in harmony. And I want to capture that since it's already happening. So that's one project that's in the works, and then I do have another book coming out like but I'm not allowed to talk about it yet, I heard from my agent, but we're definitely planning for the future. And that's one great thing that's happened as a result of all of this with this book is that I'm in touch with people who are helping me on this journey. And it was so, you know, and sometimes it could be lonely and, you know, you don't know which way to go, but there are people who now are helping guide my artistic path and making it seem like this is a reality. You can keep doing this if you just put the work into it. You know, you don't have to ever scrub anybody's toilet again. So, you know, it's nice. Or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not that there's anything wrong with that. You know, there's honor in all jobs. And so, you know, I'm just saying that I'm finally coming into the place where I feel like, okay, if I put my heart and my energy and my focus into this, then it can grow and blossom. And, you know, I have so many more stories in me to tell. Like, this is just the tip of it. And this is like the beginning. So I figure the age that I am, I have about 4 more decades to keep going and, you know, hopefully get better and tell more stories of
Mm-hmm.
our people because I love our people. And, you know, I'm the kind who used to go pilbong drumming in the mountains and, you know, do all kinds, you know, I even did the fan dance, even though I know that's not true Korean, but, you know, all the kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. And yeah, I miss my people. I miss having the kids and gathering and even just being here. I'm grateful to be here with you. So,
Yeah,
komawayo.
so how do you stay connected to like your Korean identity and is there any significance of this with your children or, you know?
Yeah, you know, we watch a lot of Korean movies now together. And well, I watch the grown up ones, but they really got me into BTS and Blackpink. So it's really interesting. Like this younger generation, they're in tune. And so they're teaching me about certain aspects of Korean culture. And then they, you know, we keep in close contact with their harmony and their kunimo and all the New York Koreans. So, so they're always talking and practicing their Korean with them. But I definitely do wish that there were more Koreans on the Big Island and more of like that kind of community to gather. So I'm going for my real estate license. So if anybody here eventually wants to have a second home or move to Hawaii, you can contact me or just live around me. We'll do gatherings together. We'll have mixed
So
groups here, you know, pajan for the vegans.
yeah. So how I was wondering also, somebody's asking, you know, do you encourage are your children creative? Is this sort of, you know, you mentioned your mom and dad, and I remember reading a story, you know, and as you mentioned, your mother is deeply involved with literature and books, and that was like somebody who gave you that gift of reading and writing. And I mean, what about your own children? Do you see them as creatives that might follow in that path or vein?
Yes, they're both definitely very creative, and they've been since they've been little, and it's really beautiful to watch them and see their development. And my little one, she's like energetic. She wants to be a K-pop star. She practices moves, She's like for real about like and then the older one is very sensitive, and she's like drawing these very beautiful animes already and making these stories, and they hand cut out their books and tie them together with little ribbon and make watercolor pictures. They're so like they're very creative, and their stories are very fantastical, but they're at the core of them is kind of about, discovering who you are as a person, and they're deep stories for little girls, and they also like make beats already on apps. Like this next generation, I don't know, they're very smart with this kind of computer stuff, and it's amazing to me like that they can make songs. They make really cute poppy sounding songs on the on their little apps, and they're learning to play ukulele and guitar, and they freestyle and sing little dreamy songs. They've been doing that since they were like 3 years old. It's really enchanting and sweet, and yeah, I love. We dance hula together sometimes, and we've done that for money over on Kona, and they're like my little team, and I think that when they grow up, I'll completely support them if they want to do that. It seems like the younger one definitely does, and she's funny, so she might be a comedian, and the older one wants to be more like an artist and like, but whatever they do, I'm happy. I
Mhm,
support them.
mhm. And then we have a final fun question. What is your favorite Korean show?
Aigu, I need like recommendations on that. I just watched the movies, okay? So if you can please PM me your favorite Korean show, then I would be very grateful. The last one that we watched was something about like these Korean K-pop stars and doing a contest, and one of them was a boy. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, this is great. I'm really, thankful that you could come and be so candid and honest and inspire people to pursue their creative path and pursue their heart, their desires to express. I think this is very important for our community to know that there are so many ways that we can be authentic and so many ways that we can fulfill a role within the community and be something that's a little different, and that's good too.